fabulous guests who I'm really excited to get into the nitty-gritty with. To introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about Shopnomix and the Nomics Group, and then we'll get into the thick of our conversation. So I'm going to pick Todd first because you're on the top of my screen. Welcome onto the show, and tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do and why you're here.
Thank you so much, Leanne. I really appreciate it. Look forward to obviously having a great conversation today. Todd Eulis, Global Chief Revenue Officer of the Nomics Group. I've been in digital marketing for 26 years. I started at a company called TMP. We built the second largest performance ad network in the world, starting back in 2000. We ended up selling that to Vivendi Universal. We solved the problem of performance marketing and risk back in 2000. Then I ended up starting a digital agency called IMS, promoting comedians, developed content, vertically integrated in the comedy space because comedy marketing was underserved. Ended up selling that back in 2011. And then I ended up working for a company called Ad.net in the incremental search space for about 14 years. Realized that search needed to be syndicated. Exited that, and then ended up coming to the Nomics Group as Global Chief Revenue Officer back earlier this year. So it's definitely been a whirlwind seeing what the team is doing and basically taking the business to the next level. So 4 companies within 26 years.
So essentially we have digital royalty here joining us today, basically since the dawn of time. You've seen it all, which is why I love having conversations with you.
Thank you.
And I'm Jeff Siegel, EVP of Revenue Operations for Shopnomix. Been with Shopnomix about 3.5 years now, which isn't too bad for a company that's only about 4 years old. Been in the industry for about 12 or 13 years now across 2 companies. Before I worked here, I worked for a CPC network. My background's actually in software engineering. So when I kind of joined the industry, I joined as an engineer, working on optimization algorithms, web servers, making sure traffic was getting to the right place. And then kind of moved from that into engineering, ad operations hybrid, and now revenue operations. So when I tell people what I do, I kind of just sit at the intersection of engineering and finance and sales and client services and make sure that everybody has the data that they need, make sure the traffic is flowing, and make sure that the reporting is where it needs to be.
Okay, so 2 very experienced people are joining me here today, which is great because we're going to be digging into a subject that is still like we're on the precipice of what's changing here. Nobody really understands, how consumer behavior is being affected by all of the new AEO, GEO platforms. SEO is being given a run for its money again since it first burst onto the scene. Let's just set the scene. So there's a massive market shift in terms of, especially in the performance space, because last click has always been the vanity metric that we've been kind of measured on. That has been blown out of the water this year as we started to see consumer behavior change, where discovery, influence, and intent is now all over the place. Like there's no single funnel of people go to a website, then they go to a review page, then they maybe click on a social media link and then find a coupon and then they purchase. So I really want to kind of dig into what is changing right now and set the scene for everybody joining us so they can understand how they need to navigate this shift, because it's, for those of us that have been in the industry for a very long time, this is probably one of the most exciting big things that's happened in the last 2 decades. It's like the next iteration of the internet is being born and we're busy watching it. We've got front row seats to watch it. So Todd, I'm going to come to you first, because when you look at commerce performance today, what do you think has changed most about where influence is actually happening? And you guys have got a lot of data in terms of how customers are purchasing online. So give us the lowdown. Let's start there.
Yeah, and we'll kind of take a step back, and where it's going. This company, Jeff's been with Shopnomix for about 3.5 years. The Shopnomix was founded based on the economics of shopping, knowing that shopping is going to shift. Okay, and then through rapid growth, over the last 3.5 years, through acquisitions, through internal development, we realized that performance, kind of bottom of the funnel, is a piece of it. But it's been able to, how else are consumers interacting? If you look at what's happening in Asia, it's been happening in Asia for many years. Consumers purchase through live streams. So the model in Europe, America is kind of moving away from traditional last click, moving more towards a holistic approach. So then through acquisitions and development, the Nomics Group was formed as a holding company that has Shopnomix as well as other entities where we have 400,000 creators under our platforms. But in reference to the question about last click, last click has always been easy. I've heard for 20 plus years the death of last click, the death of last click. But why do we all default to last click? Because it's
Yeah.
easy, it's safe, and we'll get into this a little bit later in the webinar. Because if you can say, okay, my channel gets credit for this, I can verify it through Google Analytics or through SA360, then I'm going to get credit. Therefore, I have a job, and then my channel is doing well. But as we kind of go forward, that ecosystem is blown up, and it takes obviously leaders and people like you, Leanne, to kind of come to the table and say, look, there's different ways you can interact at, you can see an ad from a creator, you can do a live shopping ad, then you might go, purchase, you can start your consumer journey in different places. So while the world is getting more fragmented, that's a big piece that the Nomics Group solves. It solves this fragmentation piece through commerce everywhere. And then we'll get into kind of how we do it through creators, through integrated search. So, the channel is last click inherent by default is safe, but it's not right. And it's not what's going to drive this business forward.
Well, it's also, you talked about it there, and Jeff, I'm going to come to you in a minute from the Shopnomics side, where brands are still operating as if a customer journey is linear than what it really is. And I'm already seeing that because I was literally in a boardroom yesterday with a C-suite client that we manage, and we were identifying where our budget was going to come from for the performance team, because it has to come from everywhere. It's not a channel on its own anymore. So tell us a little bit, if the buyer is being influenced before they ever even reach a brand site right now, because integrated shopping and agentic shopping is available. What does that mean for affiliate and performance teams?
Yeah, I think it really means that you have to spend more time identifying what all of those different touch points are, right? I think both of you hit the nail completely on the head, right? Last click attribution has been the gold standard for decades at this point, because that journey has always been simple, right? User types a search query and is driven to a page and makes a purchase, or the user is on a blog and clicks a link and makes a purchase. So that provenance has always been there. Whereas now there's all these different touch points that on their own may not even have their own attribution. It's not just a problem of understanding what those touch points are. It's also understanding how do we measure those, and how do we validate those. And that's going to be a big conversation going forward.
Yeah. I mean, why the channel label is breaking down, and we're seeing this already in the way that clients are actually putting budget towards performance. They're pulling a little bit from PR, they're pulling from SEO, from paid media, and they don't really even budget the affiliate as a channel anymore because it's integrated everywhere. It's a payment mechanism. It's paid on performance. But Todd, you mentioned everyone's fighting to own the channel. Like who owns the channel? Which one is it? What is happening right now and who loses? So what are you guys seeing in terms of some of the bigger kind of enterprise clients that work with you?
Yeah, what we're seeing is that people are scared. Just to be transparent, people are scared because it's what channel does my channel get credit? Where does AI sit? Does it sit within search? Does it sit within affiliate? Creators, what do creators create? They create content. Where does content sit? Content traditionally is known as articles. So you can see there is a little bit of channel overlap. What we ultimately envision is that every channel has its own efficacy and its own performance metric, right? To your point, the point that you just raised, Leanne, I think is spot on. Affiliate is a payment mechanism. And I think this actually puts affiliate marketing, and we'll get into this in a minute, performance marketing in a better framework, because we have the ability to track down to the most granular level. I know Jeff can get into that a little bit deeper in a little bit, but the ability to track down to the most granular level and value each piece of media, in fact, each click, and in fact, each user on what they perform at or what they're worth. So the conversations need to expand. Traditionally, a lot of brands and agencies tend to be siloed. So part of what Nomics has done, and with kind of commerce everywhere, is bringing those silos and getting them to talk, right? Because if you show that you're helping and you have access to massive distribution, which is what we do, performance marketing, distribution infrastructure, velocity on deployment for creative, We have all of the infrastructure set there. It's just getting teams to talk and showing how these things work together and the true value of each of these channels to negotiate out of, growth and not of a fear. Is AI going to take me away from search? Is AI moving towards affiliate? Is creator an affiliate? Is content in search? It's really, at the end of the day, to a consumer, it doesn't matter. And at the end of the day, to a seed level from a brand, it doesn't really matter. It's just how you
Yeah.
flag it, tag it, and value it.
Well, the thing is some people have got that kind of level of tracking, but some people still don't. So there's going to be like a catch up that's going to need to happen on the brand side, because now that we can track all of these events and all of these things that are, directing a consumer to purchase, we can also incentivize on economics of scale. So maybe, the first touch point gets 5%, the last touch point, gets 95%. I don't know what that metric is, and it's different for every kind of client that you speak to. But, Jeff, what are you seeing is happening in terms of like confusion with clients that you're working with who are coming to you with budget and saying, I want to get sales, I want to get, customers, but then they're not actually seeing the full halo effect of everything that they should be tracking, but aren't at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still a lot of segmentation, but there's also a lot of contention between teams,
Yeah.
like Todd was mentioning. So you have your traditional search side of things that, they have their buckets, they have the things that they have traditionally, been in control of, and you have your performance teams, and they've had the things that they have traditionally been in control of.
Yeah.
So we see a lot of, contention or fighting between these teams, as opposed to them working together on this overall media strategy, which is, at the end of the day, that's what's going to be beneficial to the brand, is making sure that we can combine these things, have those teams working together, and build this overall strategy for growth.
Yeah. And how many clients are actually adopting this process? I mean, you guys work with hundreds of clients. So are you seeing the bigger brands already coming to the table and kind of adopting this new methodology? Or are you seeing brands still not really even understanding it? Because I know it's difficult even for me on the agency side, where I'm kind of like supposed to be leading everybody, but we're all just trying to figure out how it is.
Yeah, you think when you introduce new concepts, it's, you take it from workflow. Think about change. People are always averse to change, and
Totally.
it's, I know we talked about this in the past. This isn't technology problems, just people problems.
Yeah.
Coming, obviously Jeff was the engineer, but like at its core, technology can solve all the problems, but is the human mind ready to adapt to the capacity? Do we have the capacity? In fact, we do, but
To
do we
learn
even want
again.
to? Yeah, exactly. So, part of when you introduce, I don't even say new things. I want to say the right thing. So it's not really new. It's the right way to value all pieces of media and all interaction. I mean, think, for example, if you buy something on a discount site, how much time do you spend on it? Maybe 10 seconds. All right. If you have, your payment synced up with, obviously, your Chrome browser. So, but what led to that purchase? Was it reviewing? Was it watching a TikTok video from a creator, but real or synthetic? You could be spending 10 minutes reviewing that, watching, interacting with the product, but the end transaction is happening, and that transaction is getting credit from X, Y, and Z discount site. Okay, why do you go to that discount site? Because you want 20% off. Okay, value that piece of media for what it's worth, 20% less, but value the interaction that got you to that path of purchase, at a higher value. So when you have conversations, with customers, and you kind of put things into pragmatic terms, people kind of start getting it. But that said, understanding and getting it to actually taking action and changing methodologies, that's a little bit of time. So you have to take an educational strategy, and you just have to kind of be agnostic. I've always been very agnostic to media. I've really been the media, it performs. You have to be agnostic to channels, and and you have lots of platforms that always want to kind of take credit, create the walled gardens, and saying this led to this, versus being objective and agnostic to what the path to purchase truly is. And we've taken the approach of just being, look, commerce everywhere. Obviously, so it's kind of round out your question. It's always an ongoing conversation, and the way to just continue the conversations and just be upfront with our clients and what they're doing and how we can help and value what we're doing.
But it also takes a level of transparency, though, because like I mean, I even dispute data that I see in my affiliate platform, or data that my client sees in their back end. Even sometimes marrying that is hard to do. But before we get into like where the market's going, because we kind of, none of us really knows. We see the little bits that we see every day as it's unfolding. What did you guys learn from building the affiliate ecosystem first, or building in the affiliate ecosystem first? And maybe Jeff, I'm going to come to you on that one.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just how to operate with performance, right? So whether it's the affiliate side, whether it's a search side, whether it's new channels, everything is performance, right? The goals may be different, the payout structures may be different, but at the end of the day, we're trying to drive sales for your brand. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of these learnings are around how do we track performance? How do we optimize for performance? And really, it's a lot about conversations with these individual brands. Everybody has different goals, everybody has different metrics. How do we make sure that we are, working with these teams in the correct way, meeting their goals and helping them, achieve what they want to achieve at the end of the day?
Well, the thing is, that means that you need to be able to provide bespoke. Like, it's not plug and play services with you guys. You're actually having a very close relationship with all the clients that you work with to understand what those value metrics are to them, to then hit the goals, which they internally are being measured on. And depending on who you speak to in the team, whether it's CMO or whether it's the head of performance, they all have different KPI metrics that they need to be meeting with the budget that they're giving you. So I guess that's quite intelligent the way that you've approached it, because most other businesses will go, here's our services, pick which one you want and pay us the money and we'll deliver on it, whereas you guys have a different approach to that. And maybe it's because you've got a lot of experience in the internet. And Todd, you talk about stuff and it sometimes blows my mind because you've seen many iterations of the internet. So this, even though this is scary to most people and everybody's going like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, you're just totally relaxed going, yeah, it's just another flow. It's like another ebb and flow of the internet. We're going to figure it out. And I think that's what people need to hear.
Yeah, I like to say, look, there's no really new business models. It's
Yeah.
just new mousetraps. That's really all it is. Brands want to reach consumers in the most effective manner possible, and publishers want to always increase their eyeballs and increase their revenue. I mean, it's really that simple. And think some of there was, I got on the internet in 2000. 9/11 happened. The internet, the before that there was the dot-com bust. And what did that give rise to? Performance-based marketing, right? If you can quantify results, then you are justifying media, defending, what you're going to do and just quantifying the results, and you look at trends. I mean, part of one of the benefits that obviously on the Shopnomix side we have is looking at so much data, which I think you referenced before, Leanne. Look, there are consumer behaviors. That, after an event, certain things are going to crash. After 9/11, travel died. After the pandemic, in-store retail died, but it gave rise to that. So you can always see there's a finite of dollars. The query data and the volume data gives direction on what people are buying, and it's not, you think about it like, okay, on the weekends, there's less traffic volume, less performance. What are people doing? They're actually out with their families. Okay. You see spikes and people buying pizzas during Super Bowls. You see flower spikes on certain days. So, it's not uncommon. It's just kind of taking a step back and making sure that you kind of, just to your point, just looking at it in perspective. And, when 2008, 2009, when the economy was a bit down, because, what happened? Well, it gave rise to other things. People wanted to go back to school. So it gave rise to, education. It gave rise to lead generation in terms of, finance and refi. So, there's always, if you look at the overall media dollars will just shift into one channel. And that's, and be able to anticipate that shift. And then on a corollary to that, dollars will shift to where they're placed. What people are spending money on, and then to what channels. Okay, channels are now investing into AI, which leads us to the conversation that we're having today is, who is getting credit for those channels? Where are those monies being pulled from? And I think that's what people are struggling with. And obviously the hope that, Jeff and I can provide insight to your team, or to obviously everybody listening, is, to be okay with those shifts and to just have open and frank conversations. If one brand values AI, that falls into search, great. If they value it into affiliate, great. How we're looking at AI, and we'll touch on this in a little bit with some of our performance studio, AI is great, but it allows so much more than kind of just a chat bot feature that is kind of being worked on. And it allows, the ability to scale content and create more inventory. So what we're seeing and what we're going to continue to see is, there's going to be a lot more inventory because AI allows more inventory creation at low price, actually content creation at low price. And then no CMO, if you have a $20 million budget, is going to give back $5 million, if content cost is going to decrease. Where's that dollar going to go? It's going to go more into media. So it's going to give rise to continue more performance marketing. As you get more inventory, performance marketing is only going to continue to increase. So kind of having the infrastructure built from affiliate and performance marketing is going to allow the payment and the infrastructure to be able to deploy to the rest of the media channels. That's why I think the affiliate business is in such a good position to capitalize, because of the infrastructure that's been built, through the history of the time. And I know we've talked about this before. It's my mission to up-level affiliate to call performance marketing, because ultimately all channels, the internet marketing is always a rate rules model, right? And unfortunately, affiliate is, it's tended to get the lowest rates. But if you continue to up-level affiliate, utilize what are the best suits of it, it allows more dollars to be commandeered towards the affiliate world, and world that all is pulled from traditional media that does not perform.
True. That's very true. But it's also very reassuring, because it's, a lot of people are starting to wonder, how do I justify my job? But you've actually just justified it right there. The more we get more efficient and the more we understand where to actually spend our money wisely, the bigger the channel becomes. Well, I don't even want to say channel, I'm self-correcting myself, but the bigger performance marketing becomes. And if you are a performance marketer joining us today, guess what, guys, you got the right job. So it's actually a good news story. I'm just going to quickly break because we've got a couple of questions, and I love it when audiences interact with us. So I'm just going to quickly ask some of these questions. So thanks, guys, if you're tuning in from all the different channels. We are hearing you and we are seeing you. If you want to ask questions, just pop them in the chat on the stream that you're in, and we'll bring them in. So the first question was from somebody on LinkedIn saying, can smaller e-commerce stores affordably use your solutions too? I mean, are you working with really, really big brands, or are you working with any kind of retailer that comes in and actually wants to reach customers across all the channels that you guys offer and work in the Nomics group? Sorry, they're right in there. They're just like, can I work with you? No. Which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. It ultimately comes down to how much volume. So the way the system is set up, it's, we ensure performance for all of our partners, because if you're not ensuring performance, you're not getting renewals. All right.
Yeah.
So
sure.
kind of the fundamental, some of the pillars are distribution infrastructure, creative velocity, as well as performance economics. Just the challenge is always going to be, it's like a bell curve. Any media ecosystem you tap into, if there's low volume, you're going to get low volume everywhere. But so the short answer is yes, of course we can, but it's always be mindful of volume. And we have, obviously Jeff heads RevOps for the entire company. It's making sure, hey, here's what the data says, here's what the goals are. And the way to ultimately, get more inventory is have looser goals to be able to commandeer more market share. So
yeah. Okay, cool. And we got another question that's just come in here as well. Maybe Jeff, you can take this one. In your experience, what creates the bigger constraint to growth today? Is it technology limitations or organizational resistance to change?
I mean, I think it's probably a little bit of both, but I would lean more towards organizational resistance.
And that's a people problem.
Absolutely. Yeah. The engineer in me will say we can always build technology to solve whatever problem we're trying to solve, right? There's going to be a conversation around the best way to do it. And I think that's not even necessarily a conversation just between, a Shopnomix and a brand. Yeah. That's a general industry conversation, right? How do we as an industry better figure out what the technology looks like to solve this problem? So I think that is absolutely a solvable problem. I think it's more about getting everybody together to find that solution and then work together as an industry to build it.
Okay, I love that. All right, I want to get into the Shopnomix model. So how does it start to look different from conventional affiliate or paid search execution? Because people need to understand exactly what Shopnomix does. So Jeff, I'm going to come back to you if that's okay. Explain.
So like Todd said, the model of the Nomics group is commerce everywhere. So I think the difference between what we do and sort of your traditional models is building that overall media strategy, right? It's all of the individual touch points that come from a lot of different places. On the Shopnomix side, we work with what we like to call hard to access, high intent supply, right? Yeah. It's identifying that user intent at the exact right moment and getting the user to where they need to go. And that
Yeah.
can be a combination of a lot of different things. That can be search, that can be social, that can be creator, that can be AI. And the difference is being able to merge all of those things and get a unified plan to the brands that we work with.
Okay, love that. When you say integrated search, what do you mean beyond the traditional search results page, Todd? Because a lot of people don't
Yeah.
actually understand what search means anymore. It's everything everywhere all at once.
Oh gosh, you're gonna get me on the hill I've been on for, like last 15 or so
Come
years.
on, give it
So
to us.
yeah, so what is, people often get focused on the execution of search,
Yeah,
right? I mean, look, back in, going back, dating myself, look, Google recognized, with the AdSense program, basically pushing out, people are going to come to a certain domain, type of certain things. So I started pushing out their pieces to publishers back in 2003.
yeah,
One of my first companies, we actually tried to do that model, and then Google kind of swooped in a little bit later. So, all right, the push mechanism. All right. And then, what's the core fundamental of search? The execution of search, people think of the SERP, but when you kind of peel back the onion, always look at what's the meaning, what motivation you're trying to do behind a certain thing. It's really
yeah,
intent, right? How do you establish intent? What is intent, right? Intent is people often mistake intent with the focus on the execution of said intent, and the execution has traditionally been typing in something, seeing a swamp of all of these things. You know, and previously, to kind of say incremental, there's different places. As we move forward with the AI world, search is becoming more integrated. And what we mean by that, and we kind of codified this term called integrated search, and we're seeing massive receptivity with folks understanding and wanting to kind of get involved in integrated search. And
yeah,
what that truly means is you're literally, as Jeff said, you're integrated within the device. You're integrated within the browser. It's literally in the name, so you're establishing it, before the user actually does a physical interaction. Okay. And then you're integrated within the AI agents. So you're native to these AI agents. You're not going to a website, typing in something, seeing a SERP ad. I'm going to call that latent search. You can call
yeah,
it, what Google is doing is latent search versus integrated. And that means the intent is moving upstream. Okay. You're moving upstream and you're getting integrated. And that's the beauty. Search hasn't traditionally changed much in 20 plus years. It's changed a couple different things, but now it's moved more upstream. It's moved towards integration within devices. It's moved towards integration within AI browsers, and it's completely changed the fundamentals. And when it changed the fundamentals, it means, ad copy, keywords, content,
yeah,
things like that. So if you look at, you can broadly define the term search as anything that establishes intent, either
yeah,
active intent, passive intent, implied intent. So kind of setting the framework of really what that means, it allows more, openness on where search is going, because you think about it, query volume has decreased a significant percentage based on AI, and it's only going to continue to
yeah.
increase. And these are kind of what we said earlier, part of having these conversations with folks to get them to understand the dollars aren't going away. They're just shifting. Here's where they're shifting. Here's what we have organizationally and how we're able to capitalize, unlike any other company in the world, to be able to capture those dollars on where they're moving towards at scale.
But that's why there's been a fundamental shift in affiliate programs, because you can't just invest with SEO and PPC and content related affiliates anymore. Now you've got social media affiliates that are selling direct from their feeds. You've got, integrated, closed walled gardens and user groups and all places where this intent is happening. And all of those intentions lead the customer to make the purchase. And now sometimes you don't even go to the brand site to make the purchase. You make it elsewhere, or you make it from within the AI if you've got agentic shopping set up. So it's becoming very complex for performance marketers to understand where to spend their money, which is why they need the data, which is why they need the flexibility, and why they need to change their way of thinking first before they can sort of jump in and start taking control of this. Now I want to talk a little bit about creators and content, because usually they sit in a different budget area under social media, but now they're moving progressively into part of performance, into the affiliate space. So operationally, like what changes need to happen? And Jeff, I'm going to come to you with this one. When creator-led discovery is treated as part of the performance system, what do you see clients changing to actually make that cohesion happen?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it all comes back to attribution, and it all comes back to
Yeah.
credit. If
Yeah.
I am a creator and I'm making this content and I'm the one that's really sparking the beginning of this journey, how do I make sure that I get credit for that process? How do I make sure that I'm, getting the revenue back that I need to continue making that content and to keep promoting products and to keep doing those recommendations? So, between the creator side and the brand side, it's about making sure that there are defined mechanisms for keeping that attribution alive and making sure that we have the data that we can track that user journey through.
Yeah. So how do brands avoid forcing creators and traditional affiliates into the same rules? Because I know, Todd, you're like vehemently against this. You're like, please don't put them together. They're two totally separate things. But while still measuring them against shared business outcomes, like how do brands avoid that?
Yeah, I have to have conversations. I mean, what do creators create? They create
Content.
content. Yeah.
Yeah.
So hey, I think anybody that argues that creators and content, because look, it ultimately comes to, how the brands are looking at the payouts, right? And kind of like it comes back to the channel fighting and attribution. To Jeff's point, it's making sure that people are paid on what they're worth. The creator economy is drastically underpaid. Creators are underpaid for the value that they're doing. And when you come in and say, how do we up level that? How do we help creators get their fair share? And if you look at a graph of how much time and attention are spent on creators versus other sorts of media, and where the dollars are flowing. Yeah, exactly. And it just takes time because, I'm going to shift money over here to here. And it takes a CMO or a VP of marketing that's really agnostic to kind of, hey, my channel's fighting for this, my channel's fighting for that. It goes back to the people problem, and I think, look, in an ideal world, we're going to be able to just be objective about all media. And I think we're getting there. I mean, we're getting but ultimately you referenced the point of, where, some of the communities, people are having conversations with AI and this, and then multi-transactions. You can start with looking, doing a question in your AI chatbot, but then interact someplace else. And this is why the world has gotten more and more fragmented, and there's more and more options and channels to buy. And that's why, obviously, kind of having a company like Nomics, where we actually have that distribution infrastructure to solve all, versus many companies have solved one piece, maybe the channels, maybe the performance, maybe the creative velocity. Ultimately, that's why we're seeing so much receptivity in brands kind of wanting to come to us, because we've been able to solve and activate across all of these channels kind of in real time. And even more so where we think a lot of the AI pieces, it's not necessarily being talked about as much. The AI chatbots, the text images or the text pieces are what people are focusing on. First, kind of one of the things that we've done is our AI content studio, kind of called Fanomics, which is where we see a lot of big kind of uptake, where, allows dollars to, reinvest into performance marketing. If you can decrease the cost of content production, down to a minimal amount,
And I just want to give a shout out on that, because you guys are giving everybody that tunes into this webinar some free credits on Fanomics to actually go and check it out for yourselves. So do you want to just tell everybody a little bit about what Fanomics is and does, since they're all going to get credits to use it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Fanomics is our AI-driven content studio. We've spent years of development on it. We did a hard launch a number of months ago. So what are the common complaints about AI-driven content? First off, the quality's not good. All right, great. Well, that's not true. We'll show you, some of the things we've developed. Second off, well, AI content is going to take my job. Well, I'm not going to be able to produce content. Well, that's actually not true as well, because let's say you're a creator and how much content can you produce yourself per day? Maybe a couple videos. What if we can take that up 20x? You have more volume, which means you get more ad dollars. Okay. And then from a brand perspective, let's say an overall brand for, say, Dunkin' Donuts is $20 million, right? And then 30% of that is towards commercials, paying people, paying, X, Y, and Z. So that's $6 million. What if the head of marketing can take that cost down to say $100,000? They have $5.9 million more they can invest into media to do what? Get more customers. So you can see where the AI piece fits into performance marketing. Where, we have multiple applications of it. Cost savings for brands, right? Amplification for customers, and then kind of what this company has been founded on, performance marketing, content performance that can be deployed at scale and trackable in real time. So, we definitely, as you said, we're giving Franomics credits away. We want people to test it out, share, and obviously if there's interest, feel free to, reach out to any of the team, on our side, see the product. We've invested a significant amount of dollars, and we see that that's the future of AI because, look, sight, sound, and motion, people are receptive to. And the fears that people have about AI is going to take their creatives. What you can't outsource is storytelling, right? If you can kind of get the right person to reach the right consumer, the right demographic, it just becomes taking the media brief, putting it into a system, getting the system to spit out relevant things that people want. The human aspect is going to focus on the storytelling, focus on, how the types of customer you want to reach. The execution of it is going to be truncated in terms of the cost, which allows more dollars to flow into performance marketing.
Things. Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing about all of this that is striking me, and first of all, there's also another freebie that's coming to you guys. There's a wonderful integrated search ebook that you're going to be able to download after you've watched this webinar. With all of this that you're talking about, the thing that sticks in my mind is, if I get more data and I get more transparency and I can influence the customer in more channels, it means I also need to rethink how I want to pay, because for years we have been kind of like earmarked, pigeonholed, whatever you want to call it, into CPA and revenue share and a hybrid of, or a fixed fee. But now we can talk about outcome-based economics. So we can talk about CPA, CPS, rev share. So what needs to be true operationally before a brand can confidently shift some of their spend? So in your example, we're going to save 5.9 million on content creation because we're going to log in and use our Shopnomix credits. What do we do with that money? Do we put it all into paid? Do we, put it back into performance across multiple channels? And how do we pay? Because now we can, with the data, pay for different actions and different event types than what we ever have been able to before. So, Jeff, I don't know if you want to take that one because you're shaking your head. I think that one's for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think, it's all part of that ongoing conversation, right? What are each of these channels worth, and what does that payout structure look like? I think one of the nice things about a CPA or a CPS or a rev share, to me, it's like the purest form of payment, right? You're paying for performance. It is the ultimate de-risker because you're paying nothing and the sale is generated. So from that perspective, if I'm a company that I would love to pay on a CPA because it's de-risking my budget.
Yeah.
After that, then it's that continuing conversation is we have all of these different touch points. What are each of these different touch points worth? Because I think historically, when you have somebody that's working on a CPA, everything is kind of bucketed the same, right? But performance is not always the same. The journey is not always the same. So it's part of that ongoing, conversation, that ongoing partnership to identify what is this worth to you? How does it fit into your overall strategy? And from that, how do we pay out on it?
But also now you have the choice. Before you didn't have the choice because everything was just like benchmarked against last click and, the user journey was ABC. Now the user journey can be any different type of, combination. Who gets the reward for all of that intent, and where's that intent coming from? Because the channel is now irrelevant, basically, is what we're saying. It doesn't actually matter on the channel. It matters on who actually, pushed that customer further down the funnel from the point of, I need this, let me go research it. Where am I going to get it for the best price? Okay, I'm going to buy now. And that's a very shortened version of actually what happens, because from the data that I see managing, quite big clients, is some customers have more than 26 touch points before they ever convert, depending on what the product or service or, item is that they're purchasing online. So if we can start to get really granular in the way that we commercialize, and even now if we could pay for like citations, for example, which is also an intent piece that pushes a customer further down the line, that means we can get much more creative with that 5.9 million budget that we've just saved from creating more content. So I want to make people aware of the possibilities. We're talking about the possibilities of what the future of performance could look like here, and how you need to be thinking about it from the kind of status quo of what it has been for the last 25 years. As you said, Todd, like not much has changed in search for the last 15, 18 years. So let's talk a little bit about, because we're coming sort of to the end of the show, but what do brands and publishers need to do now? Because the big question is, okay, you've just brain dumped a whole bunch of stuff to us here about what the future possibilities are. What do I need to do right now after listening to this webinar? If a brand wants to modernize their commerce performance strategy, where should they start in the next 90 days? I think that's a good question to start with, and you can both give your summary on that.
Well, first off, they need to talk to the Nomics group.
There you go. Just the sales pitch.
So yeah, there you go. So I mean, they just need to kind of understand that the media ecosystem's changing and have frank conversations with themselves, really, and say, okay, you mentioned the citation piece. I've been saying for years, there's three things you're not going to get out of life: death, taxes, and advertising. And part of what commerce everywhere is if citations get monetized, people are going to monetize all places. And the monetization isn't to increase, because what it is, I mean, think about like a canvas. You have a canvas, to place things in front of people, right? And the canvases are shifting, have shifted away from television to devices to smaller devices. The canvases are going to continue to shift. Brands just need to understand that shift, and the shift is going to continue to happen, and making sure that they have, understanding that the tracking is obviously going to be in place to be able to know that, okay, we're going to value this user in here. As Jeff even said, it's making sure the tracking is set up and to value the user. So brands just need to kind of have a look in the mirror and just say, guys, let's just stop fighting over channel. What are we trying to do? Let's value how much we're trying to do. I used to run a media and a publishing team in my first part of my career, and I always said, perform 10, 15% better. That allows that 10% to say, you know what, it's, I don't say explore it, but it allows you to kind of invest. So if let's say you're a manager of a company and your goal is, if you perform 10% better, then you have 10% disposable dollars to do exploratory channels. Hey, we're going to tie this together here to get learnings versus just saying, I have to hit this goal by this date and I'm going to pull money from wherever else. So brands just need to have open and honest conversations with themselves. Publishers, publishers really want to continue to grow eyeballs because they're losing it more and more up front. The publishing world is hurting. And obviously, part of the value of Shopnomix is helping publishers, bringing our portfolio of demand to be able to kind of bring new products to them, bring new revenue monetization solutions at scale, and ultimately give them the white glove service.
Yeah. Jeff, from your perspective, next 90 days, top 3 tips, like what is it?
The name of the game is data-driven decisions, right?
Yeah.
That's always going to be the best path forward. So if I'm a brand that's working on my strategy over the next 90 days, the biggest things are making sure that, like Todd said, we're having those conversations, that we understand what that strategy might look like. But just as important, making sure that we have the infrastructure in place so that we can measure all of these things. Because without that measurement, you're kind of...
You're flying blind.
Right, you're flying blind. So just making sure that you understand the process, understand what that infrastructure looks like, and make sure that the tracking and reporting is set up so that you can evaluate everything that's coming in.
So is this stuff that your account management team can advise people on if they come to you and say, hey, we want to actually have our products everywhere all at once, omnipresent, help us to do that? You guys are actually helping clients to actually plan all of that out. So they don't just come to you with budget and say, spend my money. They come to you and they say, help us be everywhere all at once, omnipresent. Yeah,
absolutely. All of those conversations, with any relationship we have, we want that to be a partnership, which that we're working with you to identify what your goals are, what the strategy should be, and making sure that you're achieving those goals in the right way. So we always want that to be a partnership, and
Okay. And what about? All right, I just want to say, guys, we're wrapping this up. So if you've got questions, you need to put them in now. Otherwise, you're going to miss out and you'll have to read and watch it all later. But one last thing I want to say is, what is the conversation that the industry needs to be having? because it's fine for brands to come and talk to you, but as an industry as a whole, what is the recommendation that we all start sort of coming together, sitting around a table? Is there best practices that need to be looked at? Are you sharing some of that data and that those like learnings that you guys are having, because you're obviously doing it at scale? Like, can people come to your website and read these reports? Are they available?
Yeah, I mean, so go ahead, Jeff.
No.
So the conversation the industry need to be having is getting away from traditionally affiliate as transaction. Are you doing a transaction or not? And transaction is the bare bones of any relationship. Jeff kind of hit the nail on the head. It's partnership. And this is part of up leveling on an industry level affiliate from just transaction to partnership, right?
Yeah.
And what that ultimately means is, when you have true partnerships and you have, then you come bringing transformational change, and then it's less about, did I hit the goal or not? It's like, okay, how are we helping you to hit the goal, and what are we advising you to grow? A lot of companies in the affiliate sector, they're smaller companies. Most of them can't, and it's fine. You can have a transaction for, you can sell 2 products a day, but if you're selling 20 million products a day, that's exciting. We see brands focusing on the bigger players because there's a lot of media noise, and that's kind of what obviously puts Shopnomix Group in a good position, the amount of distribution scale that we've built and to activate across all services. But and then to Jeff's point, not just saying we can do a transaction, sell a product, get $5. Here's access to all of the channels that we have. Here's how it's worth. It's just having a conversation. I implore the team, I want the team to have as many phone calls and conversations they have per day versus just back and forth emails. So up leveling affiliate to performance marketing and giving the guidebook on the industry level of how to do it. It's getting away from the transactional level to moving more towards the partnership. And then frankly, the transformational level, which is, hey, how are you seeing these products develop? Are you seeing citations? Can we build a business model based on that to allow you to access commerce everywhere? And that's the fun part for me, personally, to be able to kind of engage in those conversations strategically.
Well, the thing is, we're on the precipice of change, because I think the way that advertisers or brands run their marketing teams essentially now has to also adjust, because you get like a head of affiliate, a head of performance, a head of paid, a head of social, a head of, now it's just marketing, because they're all integrated in there, and performance is going to be the thing that wins up, because everybody wants to pay after the fact and not before. So we could see a massive shift happening in this industry if we start to get the data and we can start to incrementally commercialize the bits that we want to or that we value, because like something for me might be a customer that repeat purchases. Something for somebody else would be like a net new customer. I only want to pay for that. And we're getting to that point where we can. So it's been incredibly interesting talking to you guys about what's happening in the space. I think it's been a little bit mind-blowing for a lot of our peeps that are watching. I would like to thank the people that did feel brave enough to ask questions, because we do love to interact with you when we're on these sessions. We are going to link everything to you, your link to get your Shopnomix free credits, so you can go play around and create some content. We're going to link you to the ebook about integrated search, so you can start to educate yourselves on what's changing, what you need to be looking at, and just remember the rules of the game, which is, check out your data, have the conversations with people that can help you, like the guys at Shopnomix. Think about what it is that you want to build your partnerships on and around, because it isn't going to be the same for everybody all the time. And just keep your knowledge base learning, because we're all on the precipice of what's changing here. None of us really can foretell the future. I mean, Todd and I have been around a long time, but and the internet is cyclical. It does, history does repeat itself, but even we don't know what's going to be happening in the future. We are all living it as we go. So you can't be afraid. You've got to be flexible, and you've got to just keep coming along to some of these events and listening to more experienced people than yourself tell you and show you the way forward. So I'd like to thank you both for being on this webinar with me today. It was a real pleasure to kind of dig into both of your experiences and see what Shopnomix is seeing as well, and what the Shopnomix Group is building. Super exciting. And yeah, I just want to thank you guys for giving us your time for nearly an hour today. We've overrun, but I think, all good things need to come to a natural end, and here it is. So thanks so much for being here and being on this webinar with me today, guys.
Thank you so much. Likewise.
Thank you, Leanne.
See you soon.